All right. Hello, 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 hello. Sean Brady with another fabulous episode of Leverage Your Lunch Hour. Back again for a little cool episode of the Metaphysical Mindset with the one fabulous and awesome Dr. Laurel Floyd Clark. Dr. Clark, how are you today?
I'm great, Sean. How are you doing?
I'm doing really, really awesome. It's Thursday. We got the sun shining. We're transitioning to fall, and we're learning about metaphysics. And more importantly, it's cool implementation. I love it. Hello, hello.
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 It's good to be here. I appreciate the transition into fall, I must say.
It's really cool. It's literally really cool. It's about 70 degrees here. It's not humid. The sun is shining. People seem to be smiling when I was driving around earlier today, so that's a good sign.
Yes, I think in St. Louis, we are very blessed. I have friends and relatives both in the area of the hurricanes and in the area of the fires. So, here in the middle of the country, we have moderate, beautiful weather, and, just pray that those people on the coasts, their extremes can come into balance a little bit.
Awesome. And big shout out to Jaleesa in the background. Jaleesa, I noticed one thing. Can you hit record to the cloud or your computer as well?
Done.
Nice. We're working all together. Having a media coordinator is awesome because I don't have to touch the keys and she's making it happen in the background. So Dr. Clark, we've been talking about in past episodes, which people may or may not have seen. On Leverage Your Lunch Hour, we always talk about some thought-provoking and really insightful thing that you can apply in your own life. And when I met Dr. Clark years ago, she started talking about these universal laws, and they really apply to all of us. It's something you can't be avoided. It's kind of like gravity. It applies to all of us, no matter what our race, background, thinking, political agenda is. We may be knowing we're using it, or maybe not. And for those that don't know, Dr. Clark has had 4 decades of experience writing numerous books, editing multiple dozens of other ones, and just really been teaching and practicing this for a great long while, and in a way that I just learn a lot every time I interact with you. So I'm excited to learn about implementing from idea to action, getting it all in our lives.
Yes, that's such an important topic. Sean and I were actually talking yesterday on the phone about the transition from having a great idea to actually making it happen.
Yes.
And I was reflecting on that and realized that there is a formula that you can follow. I was going to say simple, and the formula is simple. Putting it into action may be simple, it may be challenging. It kind of depends upon the degree of experience and practice someone has, but it starts with the knowledge. So there are some people who are great idea people. I know that I've been in situations where I've had friends. Yeah, Sean is a great idea person. Sometimes somebody's looking for a solution and they're kind of locked into one way of looking at something, and they don't really consider ideas. Then there are people who, their minds are kind of like your bumper at the beginning of the show, where you have those flecks that kind of are all over the place, and then they come into solid form with your logo, and then they go into the flecks. So sometimes ideas are kind of like those flecks, like they're fun, they're bubbly, they're inspiring, they're intriguing. But if you don't act on them, then that's what happens to them. They just kind of, float off into the universe like a helium balloon. And as I'm saying that, I'm remembering I had a student at one time who's a great idea person, and she would always start things, or sometimes she never even started them. She would just talk about ideas. And at one point I was giving her some instruction about how to take steps to act on it. And I felt like she was this helium balloon going off into space, and I was holding the string to ground her and hold her down to earth. So that relationship between air and earth, the air being the ideas, the earth being what you stand on and the ground you walk on, that process is what we can talk some about today.
Yeah, I'd love to learn more, and certainly I resemble that and some of those statements. And I know a lot of other people. We talk about bright shiny object syndrome or ADD or something of the sort. It's like, oh, our attention could be divided, and let's just jump right into it and get more into getting this idea into implementation. Absolutely.
So attention is one of the skills of the mind, and you're absolutely correct that undivided attention is much more powerful than divided attention. Because the truth is, we can only give our attention to one thing at a time. And this is one of the reasons why sometimes maybe you walk into a room to get something and you walk in there and you don't even remember what you went in there for. And
Right.
so you walk back to the room that you came from. And when you sit on the couch where you were, all of a sudden you remember it. Now, why is that? That's because that in your brain was one image, you sitting on the couch and thinking, I want a glass of water. But at the same time, the TV was on and maybe one of your kids was asking you something. So you didn't really give that thought your undivided attention. I want a glass of water. So then when you walk into the kitchen, you don't have that memory. When you sit back on the couch, that's like one thought image, sitting on the couch, the desire for the glass of water. The point of that being, when we have ideas, it's important to give those ideas attention so they can go from being kind of weak, like a wish. Wishes are wonderful, but they're kind of weak and they dissipate. So going from a wish to a desire is one of the first steps in this formula, which is going from something that's weak, and by weak, I don't mean it's unimportant, but it's not very well formed. It's kind of vague. It might be large. It might be, oh, I don't know, kind of like jelly or something, or fog. It's not very well defined. So you go from a wish to a desire, where the desire is something more formed, but you can have desires and not even make decisions that you want to make those happen. So to go from a wish to a desire to a decision is the next stage. So a decision means not only I want that, it means I want that and I am going to do something about it. So the desire has an element of will to it, meaning I am, or the decision has an element of will, that I am choosing to make this desire happen. The desire doesn't necessarily have the will with it. So desire and will together is a very powerful combination, where the desire is a drawing energy. Think about when you're in love with somebody and they're desirable to you. So that desire is an attractive element. It means
Sure.
that you are attracted to something. The will is when you say, I'm going to ask this person out for a date, or I'm going to make this woman my wife, or whatever. That's where the will comes in, is to make a decision to act on the desire. So going from the wish to the desire to the decision is what begins to activate the mind to engage with, okay, what's the next step? So then the next step is to take that decision and turn it into a goal. And we've talked about goals in some previous episodes, and probably people in the business world have heard about SMART goals. SMART being an acronym for specific, measurable, attainable. The R, some people say relevant, some people say reasonable, and then the T is time bound. So that's kind of a big leap to go from a decision to say, I am going to do something about this, to then getting an even more solid thought form of who, what, when, where. And then that takes us to the next step of a plan, which is the how. So I have a very specific, clear idea of what I want. I am committed to doing something about it, which is where the will comes in. So then how am I going to do that? That's the plan. And then the final step is the activity, which is acting on the plan. So you go from wish to desire to decision to goal to plan and then activity.
And
So-
of course, this is being recorded live, and Quinlan comes in with his computer while we're recording. Yes,
Right.
Quinlan, what do you need?
Food.
Food. Your hamburger is in the fridge, and it's labeled QB Burger.
Oh, I don't.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, that's what I got for you for lunch.
No.
Well, what do you desire?
I desire a hot dog.
Okay. Well, I can't make you a hot dog right now because I'm here. There's hot dogs in there, and we don't have any hot dog buns.
Mommy can't either.
Okay. Well, you can put one in the microwave. The great thing about hot dogs is they're already pre-cooked. So you just got to heat one up in the microwave. Do you know where they're at? They're in the pantry fridge, in the deli drawer. Got it?
No.
All right. Well, then you give me 10 more minutes and I'll be out, but you got to wait. All right. So there you go. Real life, real happenings right here and now.
Okay,
It's
so
definitely
let's
gonna
take,
record on the podcast because I don't know how to edit any of that. So there
So-
you go.
let's take this as an example of what we've been talking about. So
Yeah.
Quinlan had a wish for some food and probably pretty quickly went to a desire for something to eat. And then from the desire to the goal, it wasn't just something to eat. He wanted something specific, a hot dog,
Right.
and he wanted it now. So, you know, the specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time bound, that was in his mind. So then the
Right.
next step is the plan, go ask dad. However, his plan has to cooperate with your plan because you had a plan so that he could do it himself.
Right.
That didn't seem reasonable or attainable for him. So his plan now needs to change, which is to wait 10 minutes for dad.
Sure.
So that's a cooperative plan, I would say. And then the activity is when you prepare it for him. So this is a really good example because sometimes people give up on implementing their ideas if it involves communicating with another person, cooperating with another person, maybe cooperating with an organization or an institution or a system. And then if they just blame the system, I mean, he could just say, my dad doesn't care about me, which clearly isn't true.
Right.
Dad cares about all kinds of people, including finishing this broadcast.
Right.
So it doesn't mean that you have to give up on your desires or that you have to give up on your goals. However, that step of plan, that's where we need to be flexible. And one of the things that I learned early on in my School of Metaphysics education is that you want to be fixed with your goals and flexible with your plans. And I'm going to say that again because it is so important and it was so helpful to me, is to be fixed with your goals and flexible with your plans. So if
That's
your
really great.
goal is to eat a hot dog and to eat it right now, but you can't eat it right now, then you have some options. So in this case, you were offering an alternative goal, which is a hamburger, because that was
Right,
your goal and that's what you had planned. However, for Quinlan, he doesn't want to give up on his goal of a hot dog. However, he needs to be flexible with his plan, which is to wait for dad instead of dad being able to do it right now. And so,
Or him even doing it himself. Right.
right. So I think that's really helpful for us to be able to discern if it feels like things aren't working, sometimes I've heard people say it must not be meant to be. And sometimes that's true, but in many cases, it's not true. It's that we need to make some changes or adjustments. And so being able to tell, what is it that I need to change here? Is there something wrong with my desire? Usually not. Is there something I need to change in my goal? Maybe what I want is fine. The specific and measurable and attainable is fine. But maybe it's the time bound element that I need to change. And that's where that element of time bound in a goal kind of blends into the next stage of the plan. So it might be that what I want is fine. When I want it might need to be more flexible. And therefore, how I attain it might need to be more flexible.
I like that. Fixed goals and flexible plans.
Right.
Well, and it made me think of, made me think of a bunch of times where, and even other people in relationships and how they approach this is, they get this awesome idea, right? And they purposely don't act on it right now. In fact, they usually, they wait till the next day or even later in the week, a couple days or longer before they actually act on it to see if it's, oh, is this really important to me? Is this something I want to put my fixed energy around and really make it a goal? Because there's a bunch of steps in between.
Right.
That's really great. That's really powerful.
I think it is too. And one thing that's helpful in being able to separate out the different elements of the process is I think it can help us to realize if it does seem like there's some kind of stuck energy, like it's not just flowing. I've heard people say,
Right.
If it's meant to be, if the universe means for you to have it, then things will just flow. And I don't think that's true, because in my experience and my opinion, I think that we are here on earth to learn. So if we already knew everything that there was to know about being human, I don't think we would even need this human experience. That's my philosophical belief about life and the purpose of life. So in situations where it seems like there are repeated instances of something that seems like it gets in our way, we talked in a previous episode about karma. I would say that may be a karmic lesson. That maybe what I discover over and over again is when I really want something and then it involves needing to ask for help, I don't like to ask for help. And so that's why I'm not accomplishing what I want to. And maybe that's my big learning, is to be okay about asking for help. Your son obviously enjoys asking you for help. And it seems like he's learning that sometimes he might need to be patient. So maybe that's his lesson. It's not that he needs to learn about asking for help. He might need to learn about patience. So we each have our individual lessons, and knowing what is that lesson for me, what do I need to do in this situation, that just can be very helpful. I think sometimes people get hung up in going from the step of desire to a decision. They have desires. And sometimes you were talking earlier about the chasing the shiny object syndrome. Maybe they have so many desires, they get overwhelmed, or the idea of just generating desires is enjoyable enough that I was going to say don't care. I don't know if it's that they don't care, but generating new ideas is more fun and enjoyable than making a decision about saying, okay, I am going to act on this one. Because the truth is, even though there's popular ideas out there that you can have it all, you can't have it all at once right now. So anytime you make a decision to do something, to relate to somebody, it also means there are other things you are cutting out. So there are probably other networking meetings you could be attending right now you certainly have lots of friends. You could be having lunch with them right now. You could be doing lots of other things right now. So you had to make a decision to say, right now, at this time, on this day, I am going to record this Leverage Your Lunch Hour podcast.
Right. Yeah, it's true. I even had another thing on my schedule that I forgot we kind of let go to the wayside, but that was the Prosperous Lunch Bunch back from when we actually were meeting in person pre-COVID. And that was
Right.
going on for years. And this is the Thursday of the month we would have done that. And we had to cancel our reservation at the restaurant that we were using, where they had reserved a space for us, and we would eat lunch there and get together. And I got a pop-up, LaShonda sent me a text, also at Medici, saying, hey, are you doing that today? Because I still had it on the calendar. And I'm like, oh my gosh, no, we're not, right? Because I had to choose to not do that anymore. And I had to talk to my partner, Jim, who did that, and said, yeah, we're not going to be using that space, hopefully somebody else can use it, but don't have it reserved for us because we're not meeting in person until this other thing's going to be, until we're all comfortable meeting in person, especially as a larger group.
Right.
So this is making more sense on a practical level where we really are giving our attention. And, I think it's powerful in saying, yeah, if we're not saying no to anything, then we're saying yes to everything. We can't accommodate yes to everything.
Right. And I think
That's
it's
really
helpful also to realize that it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with us or wrong with our ideas or wrong with our desires if we need to make changes and adjustments. I think that's part of the learning process. So it doesn't mean there was anything wrong with your Thursday regular Prosperous Lunch Brunch.
right.
It means that things in the world have changed. And so you needed
Yeah.
to change. I was just meeting with a longtime friend of mine who lives in Chicago, who was going to retire, I can't remember, 5 years from now. Anyway, he decided to retire early because he's working from home and his job is not like the most fulfilling in terms of his self-expression, but it's a good job. He's good at it. He makes good money. What was fulfilling for him about the job was going into the office and interacting with his coworkers. And he's not doing that now. He's working from home. And they don't even know when they're going to
Right.
open the office again. So for him, the element of the job that was the most personally fulfilling isn't there and doesn't seem like it's going to be there anytime soon. So for him, it's better for him to retire so he can spend more time with his wife, with his kids, his grandkids, because he likes spending his time with people. So does that mean it was wrong for him to take the job? Absolutely not. Does it mean it was wrong for him to work from home? Absolutely not. Does it mean now, because conditions have changed, he is going to change his plan about when he's going to retire? Yes. And so that's where I think understanding this, the steps can be helpful, and also periodically reevaluating our plans.
Yeah. Well, that was, I'll tie this in and then we can stop this episode and come back and do another one. So I remember it was from a previous conversation that I had with another gentleman this morning, who we've had similar conversations with like this in the past, where we're talking about retirement. And, we get this idea, and he made reference to an old commercial by ING, the bank. And what they would do on the commercial would be say, hey, what's your number? Your retirement number. Like, how much do you need to have in the bank to look like retirement? And so we kind of hadn't thought of, when we always kind of think about it in the back of our minds, like, oh, how much do I need? Is, there's numbers popping up. This person's, $894,000. This person's $2.3 million, and it's all across the board, right?
Right.
But what, to his point, is like, well, maybe that's not the number we should be looking at. And this was his realization. It's like, maybe we could be looking at the number we actually need to make us whole right now. right? What, like, to meet our monthly expenses and things like that. And surprisingly so, he's like, oh, I was able to leave my job because I realized, even though I had a six-figure salary at one point, uh, my expenses were higher. I was more commute time. There wasn't the fulfillment I had now from working from home with, being around my wife and children and things like that. My number was actually almost half of what I really needed compared to what I was really getting. And if I did a few other things, I could easily make that number and not have to go into this big job that I thought was fulfilling.
Right.
Because when he
Right.
first sat down, he's like, "Oh, I have to double my income. I have to double this," and and he's like, "Well, as we know, being around Medici and other entrepreneurs and businesses, is that you don't knock it out of the park from an income generation standpoint right away necessarily. You might, and that's great, but has not been able to double it. In fact, he's so much happier,
Yeah.
and he's with his family. He's going, he had his first big trip for the first time in a few years, but he was so much more relaxed, and he actually got to enjoy his time versus worrying about, kind of like your friend, realizing that the thing that he was actually doing that for wasn't necessarily in line with what he really wanted.
Right.
And that's profound.
Yeah, I agree.
That's awesome. Well, Dr. Clark, always fabulous to do this. I want to get more into this and, of course, take care of Quinlan and his hot dog need.
Yeah.
And Julissa, was there anything else you heard or want to add before we sign off for this episode? I bet she's taking care of somebody else in the background. We'll give Julissa one more chance for the bumpers. Julissa, are you there? You got your ears on? She probably is also working the front desk at Medici. So why don't we do this? Let's talk about one more thing until she gets her ears back on. Is there anything else, kind of another tie-in to this before we end this episode?
So to follow through on what you just said about how much money do you need to retire, I
Yeah.
think that it's really important and challenging and can also be fun to look at, what do I even need money for? So
Right.
one thing that I became aware of, there was a time, it's been a long time ago now, I was married. My husband was experiencing a lot of health issues.
Mm.
And when he went on dialysis, we were living out in the country. And so I would take him to the dialysis center that was maybe 25 miles away. And then while I was waiting for him, some of the time I would wait in the dialysis center, and it was kind of a long process. And then I'd usually leave once the stores opened, because it was early in the morning, to get a cup of coffee. And what I found is that as I was killing time, which is such an interesting expression,
That is I never thought of that before until you said it.
yeah, waiting to go pick him up, I would like wander around a store or a shopping mall, and I started buying things. And I had never been a, like senseless consumer or shopper. And I realized that I was buying things that I didn't really need. I mean, I could use them like clothes, but it was as if my need for fulfillment, I was unconsciously trying to fulfill it by buying things. And when I realized that I didn't really need those things and it wasn't fulfilling to have more stuff that I had to handle, then I changed those habits. And so, in a sense, I ended up with more money because I wasn't wasting money. So,
Right.
I think a lot of people are not really aware that a lot of the actual amount of money that they have to use, some of it comes from bringing more money in, but a lot of it comes from eliminating waste. And so looking at the ways that we waste money, whether it's spending too much for groceries or buying things that we don't need, or waiting until the last minute to pay a bill, and then we have late fees tacked on. And if we had just paid attention, we could have paid it on time. I mean, there's so many ways that we can eliminate waste, and then we have much more available to use. And that's also really true with time. You know, we have 24 hours in a day, but you can get a lot more use out of that 24 hours if you eliminate the ways that you waste time on whatever it is, you know, checking your
Yeah.
email too many times, just hanging out and not really doing anything. I mean, everybody has their own ways that they waste time. You eliminate those wasted minutes and you end up accumulating hours and then days and years when it comes down to it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost, in you saying that, it's one of the things I looked at for myself and my own consumerism. And, you know, it was just I'm like, oh, I'm buying things I don't need. But then part of my, instead of just buying things I don't need, I'm like, well, there's like this ingrained thing with me. It's like, oh, I can't pay full price. Right. And so if sometimes it's a good deal and I still don't need it, I still buy it sometimes. I'm like, I've gotten way better about that, by the way.
Yeah.
So now I just look for, and I'll remember this too. One of my roommates in college always laughed at me and joked at me. He's like, and he asked my wife this after he saw him, met her a couple decades later. He's like, oh, he's still clipping coupons. Because I would clip a bunch of coupons. I was a college kid. You know, it's like, I like to eat and try all kinds of things. So I was trying to save money, right? And I would, he laughed because I was spending so much time clipping coupons. And I'm like, he's like, you don't need all that stuff. And he was right. And I still clip coupons, but I only look and I only get it if it's something I know I want. Instead of a bunch of frivolous things I don't. Yeah. And then that's the same thing true where I look for discounts on things that I like that I know I'm going to use in my kitchen, most specifically, in my pantry or something like that. And I might not even use it today, but I'm going to use it tomorrow. So I've turned that wasted time or killed time into investing into things that, refining it to things that are more meaningful to me.
And one thing that I'm hearing in that is that passion that you have for getting things at a good price, it's one of the ways that you engage your creative mind. It's a very creative endeavor. And right. Here's an idea I have for you is that you could probably sell your services to other people to do that for them. Like there are some people who don't even think about buying things at a discount. They just have their regular store they go to. They don't comparison shop. I mean, I like to look at the grocery store ads, and it's amazing to me that you can get mushrooms for 99 cents sometimes at one store where it's $2.99 for the same size at another store. And someone would say, well, why should I take an extra trip? The amount of gas that it takes me to get to the less expensive store is practically nothing. And when I compare a grocery store receipt from one place to the other, it's a huge amount of money that I can save. And sometimes I will go to a more expensive store to get one item that they have on sale. They do that because they want you to buy that one item on sale and then buy everything else, which is what most people do. So, I know you said you don't like to teach, but I think you actually are a good teacher of that stuff. You could either teach people how to do that for themselves, or they pay you they give you their grocery list and then you go through it and find the best prices for them and, tell them, okay, get this at this store, this at this store, and they pay you for that service where I know people who would pay for a service like that.
Well, I am a food enthusiast and one of the things we avoid the processed foods. So I do love to cook and I enjoy it. And, over the years, I just figured out, well, what do I need to do for myself and my family from when I was single to, being together with Michelle and now with 4 additions. So.
Right. And you're great at it.
Well, thank you.
Speaking of your additions, since I know one of them wants to eat.
Yes.
Should we?
Yeah. Why don't we end it here and we'll come back. Okay. Jaleesa, you got your ears back on? You back in the world of us?
I'm here.
All right, cool. All right, get ready with the bumper. We're gonna hit this one. I'm gonna make Quinlan a hot dog because he didn't want his hamburger, and we'll come back and do that. So Let me know that you're ready, and I will do my sign off.
I'm ready.
All right. Well, first, Dr. Laurel Clark, thank you for this episode. I look forward to our next conversation. Jaleesa, thank you for being here and all your support as a media coordinator. And for everybody out there, thank you for liking, subscribing, and looking to other episodes and shows, both here on YouTube and on podcasts, wherever you find your favorite things. This should be going up into iTunes in the near future. So here's the big sign off. Wherever you're at, whatever you're doing, we may not see you in person, but we'll see you right here on social media. Thanks for watching.